for you, okay? So, can you see the slide?
Yeah, Doctor, I can see.
Okay, it's all yours. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله عليه أفضل الصلاة والسلام. My assignment, or the third assignment, is about psychological trauma in both Sinan Anton's Corpse Washer and Kevin Powers' The Yellow Bird, Jawad and John Bartle as an example. Yes, Doctor. So, background. Death, loss, and trauma are the common themes of both novels, which is an inevitable result of any war. In this seminar, I'm going to shed light on both novels, Corpse Washer and The Yellow Birds. War is the main reason behind all around the world's misfortunes. War brings disasters to all human beings, regardless to whether they are innocent or guilty. War word itself is trauma by all the sense of the world due to its bad consequences, loss, destruction, killing, and trauma that may remain with the people for years. If you look closely to the life of people who took part in wars, we will find out that most of them are traumatized according to psychological criteria. This is what we see in both literary works, Corpse Washer and The Yellow Bird. So first, it's very important to know something about the two writers of the both novels. First, Sinan Anton, let me in a few lines give some information about his biography. A poet, novelist, and an academic, he was born in Baghdad in 1976. He received a bachelor degree in English literature from Baghdad University, migrated after 1991 Gulf War to the United States, where he completed his studies and received MA degree from George Washington University in 1995, and a PhD in Arabic literature from University served with distinction. The Corpse Washer was his second novel, published in 2010 and translated it himself into English. The second writer, Kevin Powers, was born and raised in Richmond, Virginia. He was the son of a factory worker and a postman and joined the U.S. Army at the age of 17. He attended James River High School 6 years later. In 2004, he served as a one-year tour in Iraq as a machine gunner assigned to an engineer unit. Powers served in Mosul and Tal Afar, Iraq, from February 2004 to March 2005. Later, he discharged from military service. Thesis statement: violence, death lead to trauma. Trauma, according to many psychologists, it has been defined as a exposure to actual or threatened death, serious injury or sexual violence, for example, the actual or threatened death of family member or friend. This is according to Barry Scott, 2017, page 9. Our main character, Jawad, really experienced all these events, and the death of his brother Amuri. In Iraq, we call them Amuri. It's just like as a nickname, and his real name is Amir. Was a real accident he has faced. Later, his working with his father as a corpse washer made him to be traumatized. One of the main symptoms of PTSD, or post trauma, as we said, what is called post trauma stress disorder, is vivid flashbacks, intrusive thoughts or images, nightmares, intense distress at real or symbolic reminders of trauma, and finally, physical sensations such as pain, sweating, nausea, or sometimes trembling. Escape from reality is one of the solutions that usually traumatized people resorted to. This was very clear when Jawad first joined College of Fine Arts, second when he tried to travel to another country, but he failed in his second choice under certain circumstances. To begin with, Jawad experienced to flashbacks and nightmares at beginning of the novel. This was very clear through the text below. I woke up panting and sweating. I wept my forehead and face. The same nightmare had been recurring for weeks with minor changes. Sometimes I saw Reem's served head on the bench and heard her voice saying, "Wash me, darling." But the first time there was rain. It slipped into my dream from outdoors. I could hear drops on the window next to my bed. I looked at my watch. It was already 3:30 a.m. This is one of the symptoms of trauma, as I have mentioned earlier. At the time, if we look at what is happening to Iraqi people, most of them are traumatized due to the invasion of Iraq by American and multinational forces. Jawad started to say his very influential phrase, "Death is not content with what it takes from me in my waking hours. It insists on haunting me even in my sleep." What added fuel to fire for Jawad? What happened to his big brother, Dr. Amir, who was a physician in chapter 3? Amuri's death marked a turning point in Jawad's life. So death become a part of all Iraqi people like Jawad's family. Death is a bitter taste, and meaning has a lot meanings for people. For instance, for Jawad's father, who was working corpse washer, a way of living by, since whenever he finishes washing cups, people in return get or pay him some money. Simultaneously, death for other means life. Hence the reference to the pomegranate tree, which is watered by the water of corpse washing. That's why death has two different messages. For some, it means loss, bitter, and sorrow, while for others is entirely different connotation. That's to say, what can be applied on that is one man's meat is another man's poison. Despite to the fact that death and life are very different things, death is shown as individual entity. One is that completely different from life. In point of view of Jawad's, death and life cannot exist separately through the events and symbols that greatly influenced Jawad's life, including the pomegranate tree. Jawad's continued fighting death and his great will to live, and ultimately acceptance of death permanent uh, existence in his life. Pomegranate tree, in my point of view, is a symbol of life and hope as well. Jawad and his family cannot survive without death, and final death for both of them means life. The theme of death is through death, has shown through pomegranate tree. There is strong relationship between both Jawad character and pomegranate tree. For both of them, death is something new, or let us say new life. This was very clear at the end lines of the novel when Jawad said, I am like the tree, but all my branches have been cut, broken, and buried. My heart is beating with death, but no one knows. No one, the pomegranate alone knows. These words, what prove my saying so, death stands for coming of a new dawn. Post-trauma stress disorder followed the private John Bartle. So in this case, I'm going to move to the second character, which is Bartle, John Bartle. Post-trauma stress disorder, PTSD, followed the private John Bartle, the protagonist and the narrator of The Yellowbirds, after he left Iraq and after taking part in the war and violent consequences. This is natural end of who took part in such a war, and the consequences of that started chase Bartle in the rest of his life, and ended with sending him to rehabilitation center. Violence usually leave big wounds, don't heal, and remove easily on his mind. Sorry. That's why he was feeling guilty and his life become unbearable for him, and as a result he started to escape from his reality. Bartle described that there is a kind of fierce and hungry animal that eats war. He described war as a kind of fierce and hungry animal that eats and kill all what comes in his way, regardless to it whether it's legal or illegal, innocent or guilty. This, according to humanity rules, is something abnormal and has bad consequences in the long term. What comes, the killing of the interpreter Malik was the starting of violence for Bartle. At the time, they didn't account him for the numbers of the deaths. They were accounting every day, since death is a common in context, common in Iraqi context. The second real violence started when they shot at the civilian and killed everybody inside it. Civilian car, and killed everybody inside it. And Bartle was watching the old man bleeding to death. Military life required from soldiers to be dehumanized in order to protect themselves first and protect their mental as well. That's to say, they have to be indifferent to the violence to their surrounding. Due to the violence that Bartle witnessed, he admit to the priest that he has made lots of mistakes in his life, and remorse is chasing him everywhere, despite to the fact that he was not the reason to be blamed for what happened to his friend Morphy. But he felt lost and couldn't get rid of his isolation. Bartle felt with the remorse due to he was unable to fulfill his promise with Morphy's mother that he is going to bring him back. That's why he felt guilty. Bartle used various ways to get rid of endless speculations, such as drinking alcohol and getting out, sleeping outside by himself. But it was no use, since the flashbacks of his friend Morphy become a part of his mind. At the end, he was taken to the prison and accusing him to be responsible for Morphy's death. He tried to defend himself by exposing other people's lies, and he said he is a scapegoat of the army. Bartle find space in the prison in the absence of social interaction. After he set free, he moved to an isolated cabin by himself by the Ridge Mountain to have a tranquil life and get rid of painful memories. I don't want to desert. I don't want career, and I don't want place. I don't want anything unbroken. I'd rather look out at mountains or to have my view abstracted by a group of trees. All of these words indicate that Bartle want to leave all bad memories and start a new life free of all kinds of killing, death, and violence. By the time he felt more uncomfortable with himself and his part, Bartle imagined that Morphy's body floating down the river Tigris and entering the sea. He left his friend body away from himself, physically and mentally. At the same time, he found peace on the absence of guilt and pain, and both finally survived and rest. Leaving Morphy's body in the river has profound meaning for Bartle, which is life. His body is going to be food for another creatures. The reason why Bartle threw his friend's body and didn't get him back to his country, and then make official funeral for him. And I do believe that he didn't want to transfer his sad experience to his family. Particularly, Morphy's body has been mutilated by enemy. That's why he wanted to fold this page by throwing him in the river. Concluding remarks: violence, death lead to trauma. Conclusion: and I saw his body finally break apart near the mouth of the Gulf, where shadows of the date palm trees fill in long dark curtains on his bones, now scattered, and swept them out to sea toward line of waves that breaks forever as he entered them. By these words, Kevin Powers ended his tragedy and later started a new life. At the end, death, violence, and loss were the main reason behind the trauma with both characters, Jawad and John Bartle. Since I have mentioned that symptoms of trauma, both characters tried in a way or another get rid of this bitter reality and escape to another context, but they failed to achieve that, since the train of life is continuing generation after another. Death for both of them means life, through the examples of pomegranate tree and the life of creatures in the sea. Thank you, Doctor.